Mama, what happened? Don't you dare call me Mama, you fruitless woman.
Calm down, Mama.
Leave me alone. It's high time I teach this girl a lesson. Mama, respectfully, ever raise your hands to slap me ever again. If I slap you again, what will you do? Disrespectful brat.
Why would you hold my mother's hand like that?
Didn't you see when your mother slapped me? What did you do about that? Slap you again, what will you do?
Why would you hold...
See us now. Just because I don't have a child yet doesn't mean I am worthless.
Mama, are you okay? How dare you slap my mother? Why would you hold...
To the hospital tomorrow. I have been the doctor. Then we will know who has a problem, me or your son. And I promise to put you in your place.
Sometimes, I wonder if marrying you was even worth it. A marriage with no children is not really a marriage, Esther. Dapo said one night, his voice high and deliberately cruel, in the particular way of a man testing how much weight a person can absorb before they finally break. Mrs. Adebanjo, before your husband comes back in, I need to tell you something while we still have a moment alone. Esther looked up from her hands. Dapo had stepped out of the consulting room. 30 seconds earlier, his phone pressed to his ear, mouthing, "Sorry, walk," at her through the glass door before disappearing into the corridor. Dr. Eze had waited for the door to close fully before he leaned forward, removed his glasses, and lowered his voice. The results are back, both of yours. And there is nothing wrong with you, Mrs. Adebanjo. Nothing at all. Your tests are excellent. Whatever you have been told to believe about your body for the past 6 years, none of it is true. Esther felt something move through her chest that she did not yet have a name for. Not relief. Relief would come later, if it came at all. What she felt in that moment was closer to vertigo, the sensation of solid ground revealing itself to have been an illusion the entire time. Then it's your husband, Dr. Eze said quietly. Severe oligospermia. His sperm count is critically low, low enough that natural conception is, for him, almost impossible. Based on the markers I am seeing, this is not a recent development. This is something he has likely lived with for most of his adult life. 6 years. 6 years of bitter herbal mixtures forced down her throat at her mother-in-law, insisting something was knotted in her womb. 6 years of all-night vigils at 3 different churches. 6 years of a pastor's palm pressed flat against her stomach, declaring the spirit of barrenness broken. 6 years of a cousin pulling her aside at a wedding to suggest gently that perhaps she should see a herbalist since the doctors weren't finding anything. 6 years of the word barren attach itself to her name like a stone sewn into the lining of her clothes. And none of it had ever had anything to do with her body at all. Does he know? Esther asked. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Not yet. I have his results here as well, but I have not had the chance to discuss them directly with him. I was going to bring both of you through it together once he returns. I only wanted you to hear it first, privately, because... Dr. Eze paused, choosing his next words with visible care. Because, in my experience, Mrs. Adebanjo, how a man receives this kind of news and how a woman is permitted to receive it are rarely treated the same way in this culture. I wanted you to have a moment to simply hear the truth before anyone else's reaction became the loudest thing in the room. The door opened. Dapo stepped back in, sliding his phone into his pocket, his face arranging itself back into the mild, slightly bored expression he had worn through every appointment for 6 years. the expression of a man enduring an inconvenience rather than living through grief. Sorry, contractor wala. So, what did I miss? Esther looked at her husband's face, the complete, total, undisturbed confidence of a man who had spent 6 years believing without question that whatever was wrong belonged entirely to his wife. And in that single suspended second, Esther made a decision that would define the rest of her marriage. Dr. Eze was just explaining the next round of options, Esther said. Dr. Eze's eyes moved to her, sharp with surprise, then settled into something more complicated. Concern, perhaps, or the beginning of a professional discomfort he had not anticipated having to carry. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, because it was her body, her results, her right to decide how this conversation would be shaped, he said nothing further. In the car afterwards, Dapo drove with one hand on the wheel, already half distracted by the contractor issue waiting for him back at the office. So what did he actually say? You were both very quiet when I came back in. Dapo, have you ever thought that the problem could be with you? She asked, wanting to see her reaction. Me? Never. You know I'm a man, and a fertile one at that. I can never be the problem, he boasted, confidently. He said my results are normal. He wants to run a few more tests on you next visit, just to be thorough. On me? Why? I'm not the one with the problem. It's you. It's routine, Dapo. He says it's routine for both partners at this stage. She watched him accept this without resistance, the easy acceptance of a man who had never once considered the possibility that routine might mean anything more specific than its name suggested. He did not ask further questions. He had never asked further questions about any part of this process that did not directly involve her body, because in 6 years, it had genuinely never occurred to him that he might be the problem. Esther looked out the window at Lagos sliding past. She had told herself in the seconds after Dr. Eze's revelation that her silence was a kindness, and she was protecting her husband's honor. She had watched over 6 years exactly what this family did to a person they decided was failing them. She had lived inside that treatment, and she knew with absolute certainty what it would cost Dapo: his mother's disappointment, his uncle's quiet jokes, the particular brand of humiliation reserved in this culture for a man diagnosed with erectile dysfunction, whose body was found wanting in the one arena where manhood was measured most mercilessly. And some old, deep, well-trained part of her still wanted, even now, to protect him from that. She told herself this was love. She would not understand for a long time yet that it was actually the last reflex of a habit she was about to spend the rest of this story slowly, painfully unlearning. 3 weeks later, on Sunday dinner, Dapo's mother set down her spoon with the particular deliberate clatter she intended a conversation to become a performance for the whole table. Esther, I have been thinking, perhaps it is time you and Dapo considered other options. Other options, Mama? A second wife for Dapo, just to see. My friend's daughter has a cousin, very respectable family, still young. Esther felt the table go very quiet around her. Dapo's eyes were fixed on his plate. He did not look up. He did not, she noted with a cold precision that surprised even her, say a single word in her defense. Mama, Esther said carefully, I have actually been thinking about something too. Adoption. There are agencies in Lagos now, very reputable, and... Adoption? Dapo's mother said the word like it tasted bad in her mouth. Why would my son raise another person's blood when he is perfectly capable of producing his own with a woman whose body actually works? Esther looked at her husband. She waited, giving him every possible opportunity in that long silence to defend her and stand up for her, while she protected his muscularity that he was the reason this option even needed to be discussed. He said nothing. He reached for more rice instead. I just think, Esther said, her voice carefully even, that there are many ways to build a family. Adoption would let us raise a child together, the two of us, without involving a third person in our marriage. You are being selfish, Dapo's mother said. This is exactly the problem with women of your generation. You think marriage is about your comfort. It is not. It is about continuing a man's line. If you cannot give my son that, the least you can do is not stand in the way of someone who can. Esther set down her own spoon. She looked at her husband one final time, sitting silent beside her, allowing every word of this conversation to land on her wife alone, when he alone held the single fact that would have ended the entire discussion in less time than it took to say it. I still stand on the fact that we will be adopting. No second wife, Esther said fiercely to no one in particular, and resumed eating. But she was not thinking about a second wife. She was thinking about the precise weight of the silence sitting beside her, wearing her husband's face, eating rice as though nothing in that room had asked anything of him at all.
You don't have a choice here, Esther. She's pregnant for Dapo already, Dapo's mother said with no sign of remorse. The word struck Esther like lightning as the thought of betrayal made her gut grumble. The man she was protecting from public disgrace was actually cheating on her. It started with comments delivered in the tone of jokes. Maybe if you prayed harder, Dapo said one evening, only half laughing. My mother says women in your family probably have a history of this. Has anyone checked your grandmother's side? Esther sat across from him at their dining table, holding a fact in her chest large enough to end this conversation instantly, large enough to make him choke on every cruel word he had ever said to her over the last 6 months. But she said nothing. Not because she was weak. She understood with growing clarity that her silence was no longer protection. She knew she needed to tell him the truth now. Dapo, I need to tell you something important about... But I am not interested in your bullshit and nonsense stories. Your time is over. Dapo shut her up badly with no remorse. At that moment, the love she felt for him turned into revenge and a private power she alone possessed, a card she was choosing deliberately not to play yet because some instinct she did not yet fully trust was telling her that the moment to use this truth had not arrived, and that when it did arrive, it would need to be used completely, not wasted in the heat of an ordinary Tuesday argument. You don't have to wonder if it was worth it, Esther said quietly. You can leave any time you want, Dapo. Nobody is holding you here. You said someone else is carrying your child, right? He looked at her, something flickering behind his eyes that she could not yet read. I will, he said. Maybe it's time I considered my options too. He had no idea how close to the truth he had just walked, nor how long he had already been walking towards it. Her name is Loveth. We are getting married next month. Dapo said it the way he might announce a business trip. Flat, final, already decided. Delivered across the dining table while Esther was serving his food, as though her hand holding the plate had no relationship to the words about to detonate her life. Esther did not drop the plate. She set it down in front of him, carefully, the way she had learned to do everything in this house for 7 years now. Carefully, without spilling anything, without giving anyone a reason to say she had reacted badly. Next month, he repeated, my mother has already met her family. Everyone agrees this is the right decision. You will still be my wife, Esther. Nothing changes for you. This is simply what needs to happen so this family can finally have children. Nothing changes for you. She wanted to laugh. She did not. She had spent 7 years learning exactly when laughter would cost her more than it was worth, and this was one of those moments. You would have needed to feel what it does to a person to carry a lie that protects someone who has stopped deserving protection. To watch him grow crueler by the month, his comments sharper, his patience with her shorter, her mother's interrogations louder, and to know every single time that one sentence could end it all, and to choose again and again not to say that sentence because some habit deeper than logic kept insisting that silence was still, somehow, love. By the time he said the words, "Her name is Lovett," that habit had finally completely died. Tradition required the first wife's presence at the second wife's traditional wedding. Esther sat in the second row in Ashwaibi, chosen by her mother-in-law, smiling the particular smile of a woman ready to wreak havoc on her cheating husband. Lovett was 24. Bright-eyed, soft-spoken, visibly aware that she had walked into a story already several chapters deep. Esther decided it was time to pay back Dapo for every pain and betrayal he has caused her. She started by rebuilding a friendship with a former colleague, Chiamaka, who had drifted away during the years Esther had made herself smaller and quieter to survive her marriage, and who re-entered her life now with the easy, undemanding warmth of someone who had simply been waiting for Esther to have room for her again. She began, carefully, methodically, building something Dapo had no idea existed. A consulting side business helping local shop owners with bookkeeping and digital payment systems, using the Yaba Tech coursework in real time, charging modest fees that she quietly saved into an account in her own name, opened the week after the second wedding that no one else in that house knew existed. She was not glowing because she was happy. Not yet. She was glowing because for the first time in 7 years, she was building something that belonged entirely to her in hours that no longer needed to be spent managing someone else's family's expectations of her body. Loveth announced her second trimester, and the family's joy was loud, immediate, and almost violent in its relief. The relief of people who had spent years waiting for proof that the family's bloodline was not, in fact, broken, and who had decided, collectively and without once verifying it, that the proof simply required the right woman rather than an honest diagnosis. Dapo's mother wept at the announcement dinner. Actual tears, streaming freely, the kind of unguarded emotion Esther had never once seen this woman offer towards her in 7 years of being treated as the source of the family's grief. "Finally," she said, holding Lovett's hands the way she had once, briefly, long ago, held Esther's. "Finally, God has answered us." Esther sat at that same table, watching, and felt something she had not expected to feel. A strange, dizzying calm, because she understood something the entire room did not. Dapo is not the father of Lovett's child. "Congratulations," Esther said, warmly, raising her glass along with everyone else at the table. She meant every syllable of the toast, and none of the relief beneath it, because for the first time in 7 years, Esther was not the only person in this family carrying a secret. She simply happened to be the only one who already understood the shape of the secret everyone else hadn't found yet. Esther called Dr. Eze's clinic the following week, not for herself, but to ask, in the careful professional language of someone simply gathering information for a friend, what kind of treatment could realistically reverse severe oligospermia within a window of less than a year, and how likely such treatment would be to succeed without the patient's full awareness that anything was being treated at all. The answer, delivered by Dr. Eze himself once he recognized her voice, was direct. Virtually impossible, Mrs. Adebanjo. A condition like that does not simply resolve itself quietly in 8 months without treatment he has never received, because he doesn't know he has it. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," she said. "Thank you, doctor." She hung up the phone and began that same evening the quiet work of finding out exactly whose child Loveth was actually carrying. The baby is not Dapo's, and I am not the only one who knows it. Esther said it quietly, sitting across from Loveth in a small cafe in Yaba, 3 weeks before the baby's expected arrival, far from the house in Magodo, far from anyone who might overhear. Loveth went very still. "What did you say?" "You heard me. And I think somewhere in you already suspected it, which is why you agreed to meet me alone instead of asking me what this was about over the phone." Lovett's hands trembled around her teacup. "How could you possibly know that? You were even not..." "Dapo has a medical condition, severe, long-standing, the kind that does not resolve itself quietly in 8 months without treatment he has never received, because he doesn't know he has it. I found out a few weeks before your announcement. I have known every single day since. Why his family called me barren at every christening, every Christmas, every Sunday dinner. I let them believe it was me, Loveth. I made a choice to protect his pride at the cost of my own dignity for 7 years because I thought that was what love looked like." Loveth's composure finally broke, tears sliding silently down her face, one hand moving instinctively to her stomach. "I didn't plan this," she whispered. "I want you to know that. I didn't plan to marry him." "Then who?" Esther asked. And here came the twist that even Esther had not fully prepared herself for. Despite 3 weeks of careful investigation, despite the private lab results now sitting in her bag, despite every calculation she had run in her head leading up to this conversation. "Tunde," Loveth said, barely audible. "Dapo's younger cousin. We were together for 2 years before my family arranged the introduction to Dapo. I told them I didn't want to marry into that family. Nobody listened. Tunde and I, we never stopped, not really. Everyone assumes it has been Dapo this whole time because no one ever imagined to look anywhere else." Esther sat back slowly. She had suspected an affair. She had not suspected that the affair belonged to the same bloodline the family had spent 7 years insisting was being denied its rightful continuation by her supposedly broken body. The family had moved an innocent young woman into a marriage to fix a problem that was never hers to fix, and in doing so had created an entirely new scandal that dwarfed the original lie completely. Does Tunde know? He knows. He doesn't know what to do about it. Neither do I. Esther reached into her bag and placed a sealed envelope on the table between them. "This is a private paternity test I commissioned independently, using a hair sample from Dapo's comb and one of yours that I collected with your house girl's help 3 weeks ago, without either of you knowing, because I needed certainty before I did anything else with this information. This child is not biologically yours, Dapo." Loveth stared at the envelope like it might detonate. "What are you going to do with it?" "It depends entirely," Esther said, "on what you decide to do in the next 2 weeks. I am not your enemy, Loveth. I never was. You are a young woman who got pulled into a marriage you didn't choose, carrying a child conceived before that marriage even began, married to a man whose family destroyed me for 7 years over a medical truth he still does not know is his." Esther chose the same dining table, where months earlier, Dapo's mother had first suggested a second wife, while Esther quietly proposed adoption and was told she was being selfish. She invited the entire family, Dapo's mother, his uncles, Loveth, 8 months pregnant, sitting beside Dapo with an expression Esther had coached her through for an hour beforehand. Calm, composed, ready. Dapo had no idea what was coming. He had spent the last 1 year growing more comfortable, more entitled, more casually cruel toward Esther in the easy way of a man who believes the worst consequences of his choices have already arrived and been survived. "Esther, why have you gathered everyone like this?"
Dabo's mother asked, settling into her chair with the proprietorial comfort of a woman who had presided over every important conversation in this house for a decade. Because there is something this family needs to know. Something I have carried alone for 7 years to protect a man who has spent every one of those years letting me carry it without ever once thanking me, without ever once even knowing what I was protecting him from. She placed a folder on the table. Inside it, Dr. Eze's original report from 1 year ago, finally released with Esther's authorization. Last year, Esther said, looking directly at Dabo, "You, not me, were the reason we could not conceive. Severe oligospermia. He told me while you were outside taking a call. I made a decision that day to protect you from what this family would have done to you if they knew. I let your mother call me barren at every gathering for 7 years. I let her force concoctions down my throat for a cause that was never mine to carry. I did all of that, Dabo, to protect your pride." The table had gone completely silent. Dabo's face had drained of color entirely. "That's not. That can't be." "It is, and you can verify it with Dr. Eze directly today if you do not believe me. But that is not actually the reason I gathered everyone here tonight." She turned the folder toward Loveth's section of the table, sliding the second document forward. "This is a paternity test. The child Loveth is carrying is not biologically yours, Dabo. It belongs to your cousin, Tunde, whom Loveth was involved with for 2 years before this family arranged her marriage to you without ever asking what she actually wanted." The eruption that followed was not loud in the way Esther had once imagined satisfying revenge might sound. It was something stranger. A slow, horrified unraveling, Dabo's mother's hand flying to her mouth and uncle standing so abruptly his chair toppled backward, Dabo himself simply staring at the documents in front of him as though they were written in a language his mind refused to translate. 7 years, he said, finally, his voice cracking, looking at Esther with something between devastation and a question he didn't know how to ask. 7 years, you knew? 7 years and you let me believe? Dabo said, raising his hands to Esther in an attempt to slap her, staring at her deadly. "Don't you dare do that," Esther said. "I let you believe it because I loved you enough once to think your dignity mattered more than my own. I am not protecting you anymore, Dabo, because I have stopped caring whether you suffer." The marriage to Loveth was dissolved within a month, quietly by mutual and rather urgent agreement, with Tunde's family absorbing the resulting scandal in the particular hushed, face-saving manner that wealthy extended families have perfected over generations. Loveth moved back to her mother's house to have her child, and to Esther's quiet satisfaction, Tunde, to his credit, whatever else could be said about the affair, showed up. He claimed the child publicly, married Loveth within the year, and the two of them built, away from this family's reach entirely, a life that no longer required anyone's permission. Dabo's mother did not apologize to Esther. Some collapses are too complete for the people responsible to survive them with their pride intact, enough to offer anything as costly as an apology. But she stopped speaking of grandchildren at every gathering after that. She stopped entirely ever saying the word barren again in Esther's presence, because everyone in that family now understood exactly whose body was never the problem. Dabo sought treatment, finally, 8 years too late for the version of pride that treatment might once have spared him. Dr. Eze confirmed what he long suspected, that early intervention, had Dabo known to seek it at 30 rather than discovering it by public humiliation at 38, might have changed everything about how this story unfolded. He asked Esther once, quietly, weeks after the dinner, whether there was any path back for them. "You spent 7 years blaming me for something you didn't even know was yours. You called our marriage worthless to my face more times than I can count. Your mother poured poison down my throat for a cause that was never mine to carry. I am not angry that you didn't know, Dabo. I am finished with a marriage where the only thing holding it together was my silence and your comfort." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to anymore. The woman who had once been called barren at every family gathering for 7 straight years now stood in an office bearing her own name, having proven in the most undeniable way possible exactly whose fault none of it had ever been.